The Strange Talent of Luther Strode is a critically acclaimed series from writer Justin Jordan and artist Tradd Moore, and produced by Image Comics. It is an incredible genre-spanning story with some amazing art, and with a movie adaptation currently in the works. I am Adam Andrews, a top 10 nerd, and I am happy to present you with the top 10 Luther Strode facts you need to know. Number 10. Luther Strode himself. At the beginning of the story, Luther Strode was a pretty scrawny high school kid. He was a nerd, he liked playing video games, and he had very few friends. Namely, he had his best friend Pete. He also lived with his agoraphobic mother, who was a really great mom despite how much she worried about her son's well-being. Luther grew up in a pretty unhealthy environment, with his dad being an incredibly negative force for both him and his mother. Luther's father was physically violent with his son and wife up until he was sent away to jail. Luther has a crush turned lover in the form of Petra, an edgy girl in school who had been interested in the tall, lanky nerd for the longest time, even before he was introduced to the Hercules method. Number 9. The Method. The Hercules Method was a book that Luther came upon that offered promises of quote-unquote getting buff today, and offered a mindset that would allow the practitioner to experience extraordinary change, which Luther wanted in his life. It turns out that the Hercules Method was actually an incredibly old text containing ancient techniques that allowed Luther to rework his body and unlock the strange talents buried deep within. The key to the Hercules Method is, quote, to focus your mind, body, and spirit towards one goal. By bringing all three into alignment, the physical enthusiast can bring all of them under his control. Such control is the key to change. Extraordinary change. And change is exactly what Luther experienced. Number 8. Changing. Although he hadn't undergone much of a physical change yet, Luther already began experiencing changes to his body. For starters, he was now incredibly hungry, but he also saw his mother dropping some plates before it actually happened and was able to catch them safely. When he was at school, his friend Pete physically pushed him into an interaction with Petra, an interaction noticed by the bully Paul, who tries to embarrass Luther. But oh, how the turntables, as Petra instead gave Luther a big ol' smooch and said Luther was more of a quote-unquote real man than Paul was. Later in gym class, while playing dodgeball, Paul tries to hit Luther with an incredibly hard dodgeball to the face, and not only does Luther catch the ball without looking, he sees all the ways Paul could dodge, and throws the ball so hard back at the bully that it hits him in the face, causing him to fall backwards with his nose gushing blood and left his nose broken with a bruised face. Number 7. Strength. So obviously Luther has gained a buff to strength. It's further shown when Paul confronts Luther and Pete in the washroom. Getting ready to give Luther a beat down, Paul makes the grave error of calling Petra a bad word. And Luther don't like guys who disrespect women. He lets Paul know that by giving him one hell of a punch to the face that dislocates his jaw and gives him a serious case of whiplash. In fact, Luther's transformation sees him grow about a foot taller and put on almost 50 pounds of pure muscle in the end. His strength is eventually elevated to a point where he can rip people in half without effort, he can break wood easily with his bare hands, and he even bends steel. His strength allows him to lift at least a ton without much effort. He's also incredibly durable and resilient, almost completely impervious to most damage, with bullets not even being able to pierce through his incredibly thick muscles. But it's not just his strength and resilience that have been improved. Number 6. His senses. As I mentioned earlier, Luther was able to see his mom dropping plates before it actually happened, and could see all the ways Paul would be able to dodge his dodgeball before he threw it. This is because Luther's senses have also been improved through the method, allowing him to see, hear, smell, feel, and taste things that us regular humans can't. He can see through people's skin, organs, bones, and muscles, meaning he can assess damage inflicted on others and on himself. But he also has a degree of accelerated probability. He can see the possible ways that an enemy might attack, allowing him to act accordingly to defend himself or defend others. He can even feel these things happening without actually seeing them, like when Pete went to put his hand on Luther's shoulder and Luther instinctively smacked it away without looking. Thanks to this and his strength, he has an unfathomable amount of super speed, moving so fast that he is almost a blur to his enemies. He can catch a punch mid-throw, move behind an enemy before they can even react, and can even dodge bullets, even if he doesn't always need to. Number 5. Becoming a hero. Being a big ol' nerd, a fan of video games and comic books, Luther's friend Pete, upon realizing the potential of Luther's abilities, after Luther saved a woman from 2 robbers in a convenience store, convinced Luther that he needed to use these gifts and abilities to help people, to become a vigilante. He created a mask and uniform for Luther that is actually one of my favorites I've seen in a while. It's pretty cool. Luther went off jumping from rooftop to rooftop looking for crime to fight, and just as he was getting bored, he stumbled on a man and woman in an argument just as the man was starting to get physical, and as we know, Luther don't like that. Luther stepped in, stopping the man before the woman began to hit Luther with her purse. Luther definitely gave up on helping her, but still made sure she was safe from a distance before calling it a night. He would later use his powers against organized crime, but we're still in origin territory right now, so we'll forget about that for now. Number 4, the Librarian. The first major antagonist of the first volume of Luther Strode was another practitioner of the killer method called the Librarian. He was bald, incredibly physically fit, and very weird. But he also was incredibly brutal. The Librarian had been systematically and brutally de-lifing all the people who had been stopped by Luther. He brutally took out the bully, Paul, and his whole family at their dinner table. He took out the 2 criminals who tried to rob the convenience store while they were being taken to prison. And lastly, he showed himself to Luther, interrupting the protagonist as he was beating up the boyfriend who was getting physical with his girlfriend. He seemed to be quote unquote finishing the job for Luther, and encouraged Luther to do it himself, which, being the hero, he refused. The Librarian knocked out Luther, and when he came to, the Librarian explained who he was and the origins of the method. The Librarian launched into a speech that revealed that the Hercules method that empowered Luther had ties all the way back to the very first murderer, and was actually called the killer method. The Librarian then went on to reveal that he had been tasked with discovering a practitioner of the method. He claimed that Luther was close to perfection as he had ever seen, only Luther refused to become a crazed killer like he wanted. The Librarian caused the passing of Luther's father, best friend Pete, and Luther's mother, which was all the motivation Luther needed to rip the Librarian's spine from his body, literally. Number 3, Cain. As the Librarian mentioned, the killer method has ties all the way back to the first person to ever commit the crime of murder. This person being the biblical Cain, who de-lifed his brother with a rock. According to the comic, Cain is the one who created the method. He has used the method all the way back in ancient times to grow strong, wise, and incredibly powerful. So much so that he could defeat whole armies with his bare hands. He wrote down the knowledge he acquired of this method into a series of texts that over thousands and thousands of years eventually became what was packaged as the Hercules method to lure more and more practitioners in. But more than this, and what I haven't mentioned yet, is that the method allows the user to actually become immortal and stop aging. Meaning Cain is in fact alive, and as the trilogy continues, he turns out to be the #1 bad guy. Of all the adversaries Luther faces, Cain is the strongest and most powerful of them all, and it takes everything Luther's got, plus the help of his allies, to even take this guy on in the first place. Number 2, other method men. Before Luther can come face to face with Cain, however, he faces many other method practitioners. Other than the Librarian and Cain, there are several other fighters who come into the path of Luther Strode. There is the Binder, who is charged with restraining any method user who gets too powerful, and makes up for his lack of equivalent speed and strength against Luther with his skill and preparation. There's also the Twins, who probably had some of the best backstories and development of all the method users, although only one of them put up a good fight. There are the Guardians, who were the last line of defense before facing Cain, and they were no pushovers. But last and certainly not least was the historical Jack the Ripper, who is one of the creepiest, fastest, and most terrifying practitioners of the method in the whole story, and puts up one hell of a good comic book fight. And at number 1, the movie. With Image Comics, The Strange Talent of Luther Strode being universally acclaimed and selling out all over the world, the writer Justin Jordan and the artist Trad Moore went on to become 2 critically acclaimed comic book powerhouses, working with both Marvel and DC. They went on to create 2 more follow-ups to Luther Strode's story in 2012's The Legend of Luther Strode and 2015's The Legacy of Luther Strode, which finally completed the story. More recently, production company All Nighter has announced that they will be adapting the series alongside Jordan and Moore, with Jordan actually adapting the comic to the screenplay. Jordan said in a statement, "All Nighter is dedicated to staying true to all the foundations, from the tone to the mythology, and of course, the kinetic action exemplified by Trad's artwork that people have loved about the comic." End quote. With the creator of the series on and promoting the project, I have faith that they will create an awesome film. Alright y'all, those are 10 facts you need to know for a basic understanding of Luther Strode. Did you find this video helpful? Well, let us at Top 10 Nerd know with a comment, a like, and or a subscribe. In the meantime, I've been your host Adam Andrews. You can find me on Instagram at @the_schmatum, and until next time, peace out nerds.